Hi, I'm Eddie Obeng, and this is How. How is about showing you how to get stuff done. It's a daily input, or if you actually watch the channel, maybe you binge on it. Lots and lots of different people engagement tools, performance enhancement tools, problem elimination tools, possibility exploration tools. You know, there's different ways of doing things in our new world, and I try and share them with you. The one today is about really thinking about the world a different way and extracting inputs which make a difference. It's called knowledge. Let's jump on Cube and let's have a look at knowledge and see what we can find. So this particular pet is from my book, Making Engineering Happen. And I'm going to start with a quote. And the quote is from Elon Musk. And it basically says, it's important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. The normal way we conduct our lives is that we reason by analogy. With analogy, we're doing this because it's like something someone else has done, or it's like what other people are doing. With first principles, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths and then reason up from there. Now, this is really important because the human brain burns tons of energy, and so we try and minimize the energy by using shortcuts. And that's why we reason by analogy. We do monkey see, monkey do, and so on and so forth. And that's not knowledge. That's just analogy, and it really doesn't work for everything. It's helpful for discussion, but this, for example, is a human brain, okay? So a human brain, but a human brain looks a bit like a cabbage. But just because a human brain looks like a cabbage doesn't mean you can learn anything about the human brain from studying a cabbage. Nor can you learn much about cabbages by studying the human brain, but they do look similar. So analogies are helpful but not useful. One of my favorite films growing up was something called The Prisoner, Patrick Magoon. If you haven't watched it, watch it. It's set in an English village called Portmeirion, but they have all these prisoners and they're all trapped in this village. That white ball is the thing which goes and grabs them if they try and escape and then smothers them and they have to come back. So he's obviously in this picture here being caught by the little white ball, and he's pulling a face as he walks up, and this is him being enigmatic. But it always starts in the same way, where they'd come up to him and they'd say, "We want information." He says, "I don't have any information." They say, "We want information." And they'd say, "Who are you?" And he'd say, "I am a free man." And then they'd say something like, "You are number 6." You can see the number 6 on his coat here. And they say, "I'm a free man." It was great fun. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you that is because information is a jumble of data, of numbers. And one of my favorite conference presentations ever was me turning up to do a conference, which is an international conference, with information professionals. So, so I walked up on the stage. Okay, and I'll try and do a stage like that. The stages have curtains. I can't remember. Okay, let's pretend it has curtains. Okay, so I walked up onto the stage, and this is me on the stage, and I said, "Hello, I'm Eddie Obeng. I shouldn't be here because I'm a fraud." And they said, silence, obviously. I said, "I'm a fraud because I don't know what information is. What is information?" There was silence. So I said, "If I say to you 42, is that information? Put your hands up if you think it is." So some hands went up. Okay. I said, and other hands were down. I said, "Oh, well, obviously not everyone agrees with that. So 42 years, is that information?" So hands which were down which were up went down. Hands which are down now went up. Okay. And I said, "Well, obviously that's not quite right either." So if I said 42 years old, is that information? By now, of course, everybody's nervous, so they've all put their hands down. So I said, "Well, okay, 42 years old." I said, "What's missing?" And somebody said, "The question." I said, "Correct. If you'd asked me, 'How old are you, Eddie?' question, and I said 42 years old plus data, that gives you information upon which you can act." In other words, the formula is question plus data equals information. Data is the answer to the information is the answer to the question asked. Data is what you use to produce the information. And what happens is people jumble them up. They just look at data and they think it's information. So they say information technology when it's mostly data technology. And that, again, is reasoning by analogy and not from first principles. This is really important. Question, information, data. That connection is really, really important. So why am I telling you this? because if you can use that, you can simplify the amount of conversation you have, the amount of data you need to collect, and the amount of disagreements which you have by just boiling it down and understanding. So if we want to put it into practice, let's have a look. So let's say, for example, you're running an enterprise and you've got a particular project. I don't know what it is, okay? And you're trying to make sense of it. Well, usually people have reports, and the reports are mostly full of data. 42 units, 36 board, 12 days a week, 12th of June. That's just data. The question is, what data do we need to bring together? So what questions do you need answered? Are we on time? Are we late? How many people are involved? So what are the questions which are required? How do you get to the questions? Well, you get to the questions three ways. Either you have intelligence because somebody's helped you. Intelligence then allows you to work out what questions you need to ask. Or you look at the actual process and you go, well, where's the bottleneck? So that tells you what questions to ask. Or you have intuition, which allows you to ask the questions. These then allow you to have the information. Once you've got the information, more information gives you intelligence. More information helps you understand your process better. But just gathering data also is helpful, because if you swim in data long enough, you get intuition. So that's the structure of knowledge, if that makes sense. So what I try and get people to do is I try and get them to think about whether their structure is right. Have they got missing links? How do they feed back information into their intelligence? How do they use their data to improve their intuition? And are there any broken links? But also I get them to think really hard about the mechanics of it. What are the questions we need answering? What's the data we need? Who's the person who's going to own the data so they don't give us wrong data? Why? Because if we go back to my presentation, the punchline for this joke was, so I said, so question plus data equals information. How old are you, Eddie? 42 years old. Information. Bad news, I'm not 42 years old. So although it's information, it's incorrect information. And so the data owner is really important. Of course, when I said that, everyone laughed. The data owner is crucial because they ensure that the data you've assembled is actually going to answer the question correctly. But also I have another version of knowledge which you might find useful, which is when you're working with other people on things like big data and AI, just have a think about, the past, knowledge from the past, knowledge about the future, which is really where it's useful, and using the same framework to try and build intelligence, information, generate questions, take the data, feed it back in, but also think quite hard about things like the models you use, visualization, how those also help you to generate questions. And in the world of AI, the development of prompts, you start to understand why that's so crucial. So guys, that's knowledge. Questions first. So whenever you're doing anything, every meeting, every report, start with the questions. What questions am I trying to answer? Brainstorm those. Then look at the data you need to accumulate to make it work. Then make sure the data owner has given you appropriate information. Then put it together so you get the information and then act on that information. Subscribe to the newsletter on LinkedIn. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. I'll see you again. I've been Eddie Obeng.